My name's Eddy Shuldman, and this summer I'm teaching a summer course here at University of Oregon on communication and building culture in the classroom. I'm a retired teacher. I worked in alternative education, and I developed a peer mediation program for my school. I also developed a peer mediation program for our teachers union and did a lot of training to help people become mediators themselves. Mediation is this, I think, remarkable tool that helps people communicate about problems that they're having, disputes. It's unlike the traditional kinds of disciplinary approaches that you find in schools and in management, where basically you have someone who sits in judgment of you, issues a punishment, and you somehow have to recover from that and move on. When people have a dispute, they may go to court, and again, you have someone who makes a ruling, but it doesn't do anything about your ability to resolve the feelings that you have. So what happens in mediation is you have someone who's neutral, who sits between two disputants, who helps those two people communicate their issues. The goal is not to necessarily cause them to become friends or to care about each other deeply, but to understand what led them to such intense feelings and to come to a resolution that allows them to function in the same building, under the same roof, in safety. My favorite story is about a young man named Kevin who seemed to get into altercations with his peers like every week. I remember initially we had a first mediation. It worked. You know, he was able to recognize what he did. The other student was able to see how they kind of egged him on. A week later, we're in mediation again, Kevin and another kid. And we go through the whole process. And actually, in a month's time, Kevin was in 4 separate mediations. And I'm beginning to wonder what's going on here. Is he addicted to mediation? But it was working. He was resolving conflict. He was beginning to get some understanding of the process. A 5th mediation had to come up. And as we sit down and I pull out the rules sheet, he looks at me, he says, "Eddy, I got it." And he turns to the other disputant and he says, "So this is how it's going to work." And he goes through the rules, and then he looks at the kid and says, "So tell me what I did to upset you. What did I do to get you angry with me? And then I'm going to tell you what I think." And he conducted the entire mediation. I said nothing. And it was pretty amazing. And then we had the conversation of, okay, Kevin, now the goal is to avoid having to go into mediation. And so he and I actually spent time learning how to do self-mediation to get himself out of trouble in the moment, as opposed to waiting for a separate intervention. You know, the very first thing is getting 2 disputants to agree, to even sit down at the same table and talk out their issues. So sometimes a mediation may come as the result of disciplinary action. 2 students are fighting, it evolves into a fist fight, and both students are suspended. At the principal's discretion, that principal might say to the 2 students, "I really expect you, now that you've had a cooling off period, to sit down with peer mediators," which would be a couple of students who are experienced, or with a teacher who's done this before, and talk out the issues, because bringing you back, even though you've cooled off, those issues remain. You haven't solved anything. And so part of my condition for allowing you back to school is that you complete a mediation within 1 week, or you complete this mediation before you return to class. I've seen some principals use it to get kids back to school faster, so they're not out for the full 5 days. When the disputants sit down, the mediator is ideally someone who doesn't know the disputant, so that there's truly that sense of neutrality. I don't know either of you, I'm not taking sides with either of you, and here are the rules. And the rules involve civility issues, no name calling, telling the truth as you know it to be, no overt gestures, no threats, and above all, confidentiality. What we say in this room stays in this room, and we're here until we come to an agreement. So when both parties agree to that, then the mediator will determine which person speaks first. The other person listens, and the person who's speaking talks to the mediator. That eliminates some hostility between the two right there. You're not looking for any dirty laundry, old things that go way, way back. You're looking for what happened here in the moment. The mediator tells the person back what they've heard, and then you turn to the other disputant and you ask the other disputant for their side. After you go through all that storytelling, you point out the areas of commonality, ask if there's any information missing. If not, what you then try to move toward is, what does each party need from the other party in order to feel safe under the same roof or in the same classroom? And you work toward a common agreement. If that agreement can be made easily, that's great. If not, you may have to backtrack and find out there's more information. Ultimately, you have an agreement, they both sign off on it, and hopefully they both adhere to their agreement. The benefit is at the end, both parties get something out of it. When there's a disciplinary action and a student, for example, is suspended for fighting, they're still probably angry. There hasn't been an opportunity to communicate. There hasn't been an opportunity to empathize with the other person. So I think there's an opportunity to feel like you've been heard, that you've really gotten your say, that the other person that you were in dispute with understands. They may not agree with you, but they understand where you're coming from. And you have a guarantee of some set behaviors that will or won't happen as a result of this mediation. You know how to function. So as two teachers who've had a dispute about noise in the hallway, noisy classroom, there's now some understanding about how one teacher will manage their kids so that they aren't intruding on the other teacher's space. I think it's really important that the kids get the training, and you get an outside training organization to come in. There are numbers of them that do this professionally. I think CRU, Conflict Resolution Unlimited, was the group that I worked with. And then you get some teachers involved in that training, but you trust the kids to learn it. What happens is, particularly if you select kids who have gotten into a lot of disputes, they become some of your top mediators. It alters their behavior, so it's win-win. You've got great kids who understand mediation because they've been through it. They've been in conflict, so they understand that. And it changes the tone in the building. You become more focused on solving problems than punishing problems. Teachers ought to get that training as well, but avoid the temptation to do all of that dispute resolution themselves. Just that I think it's very easy to revert in frustration to punitive kinds of ways of dealing with student behavior, but that our ultimate goal is education, and that means teaching behaviors, not punishing them. And mediation is one very, very positive tool. It's not the only tool. It can be used in conjunction with just a good, solid discipline plan, but it ought to be a part of a solid disciplinary plan. And I think it's lacking in most schools. Let's teach kids the kinds of behavior, the kinds of mechanisms for communicating that really work so that they can be productive citizens in school and outside of school. When you punish, I don't think you're teaching much.